CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The World Today, live from CGTN in London. I'm Paul Barber. The top stories this hour. Conflicting reports from Afghanistan's Panjshir Valley, the last holdout against the Taliban, where fighting continues. New Zealand promises to fast-track terror laws after Friday's mass stabbing in Auckland. Anti-government protests in Thailand, but the Prime Minister survives a confidence vote. And teens for vaccines. The Colorado campaigners working to get young Americans jabbed. In Afghanistan, there are conflicting reports by the Taliban and their opponents that they've taken control of the last province in the country. Fighters in the Panjshir Valley, some 80 kilometres north of Kabul, have vowed to fight on. That may delay the Taliban naming their new ministers. Meanwhile, some international aid is arriving, as Yola Davith reports.
These are Taliban fighters in an undated video filmed by one of their men. They're said to be attacking the last remaining area that's opposed to Taliban rule. Using former American Humvee vehicles, they say they're near the village of Golbahar at the southern end of the Panjshir Valley. During the past days, there have been unconfirmed reports from both sides of the casualties they've inflicted on the other. These Panjshir fighters are part of an alliance of local militia and former Afghan security forces opposed to Taliban rule.
We are in position and fighting is ongoing. The enemy is dead and they've taken this weapon from the Taliban. Their bodies are spread on the ground and everybody can see them.
But Taliban sources claimed on Friday they had retaken the valley. Fighters celebrated late into the night once the news was relayed to Kabul. At least 17 people are reported to have been killed during the celebrating.
Praise to God, Panjshir was captured. Only Panjshir remained, and I hope all Muslims are comfortable.
As some of Afghanistan's population struggles with the changes last month, the instability has affected the economy. It may be several days yet before a new government is announced by the Taliban.
Taliban took over Panjshir partially or fully, and that's why I think Taliban did not announce their government, because they wanted all the internal troubles and all the internal wounds closed, and then they will announce their government.
Some international help is arriving. This video released by the Taliban is said to be showing a plane arriving in Kabul from the United Arab Emirates. Another Gulf state, Qatar, is also negotiating with the Taliban on the support they need. Also in the capital, Afghan women stage a protest calling for their rights to be respected under the new regime.
The purpose of our gathering today was to establish our rights, the right to education and the right to work. We gathered yesterday and today to defend our right to education and our children and do something.
There are reports they were confronted by members of the Taliban and allegations that tear gas and electric tasers were used against them. Most Afghans will hope a new government, whenever it's announced, will bring stability, and that Taliban rule this time will be less harsh than 20 years ago. Yolo David, CGTN, London.
Let's go live now to our correspondent in Kabul, Zamaralai Abbasin. Zamaralai, the Taliban saying it's captured the governor's office in Panjshir Valley. What's the latest?
Hello, that's the news we are hearing at Kabul too, and the Taliban claim that they have been taking many of the districts in Panjshir Valley, the four major districts, Shatul, also Rakha, and at the same time Paryan and Abshar, or the four districts that the Taliban Culture Commission member Inamullah Samangani just claimed, talking with local media. And also the Panjshir central hub, or the capital city of Bazarak, is already surrounded by the Taliban, but there were several traps for the Taliban along the way, and we get reports from the area that there was a side of the mountain which was bummed up, and then it blocked the road, and the Taliban cannot get backward. The setbacks is now impossible for the thousands of Taliban inside Panjshir Valley, particularly close to Bazarak. Yes, there have been videos showing from the pro-Taliban accounts that the Taliban have entered the district office, the central areas, and also police HQ of Panjshir Valley. Yet we are not much far from the collapse of the Panjshir, whatever we hear. And also I was just talking with a Taliban member, and he told that that was not a wise decision for the Panjshir force, that they got the resistance because there was an option of negotiation, and it was far better.
In terms of what's happening at the airport there in Kabul, what do we know about flights landing?
Yes, Kabul airport is far much clear now, and the domestic flights were already started on Friday, 3 p.m. local time. The Civil Aviation Authority announced that the first domestic flight is going to land in Mazar-e-Sharif from Kabul. And also there are reports that another flight landed in Herat, and also the domestic flights are looking much comfortable, and the ease has already started. In cooperation and technical areas with Qataris and also Turkey technical teams, that the Taliban are now able to finally open the airport for the domestic flights. Yet they also claim that it will take less than a week that they will start the economic and commercial flights abroad, and that's what they are working on together with Turkey and Qataris.
Zamoralai Abasan in Kabul, many thanks indeed. Well, the United Nations has warned that 500,000 refugees could flee Afghanistan in the wake of the Taliban takeover. But neighbouring countries have been dealing with an Afghan refugee crisis for 40 years, during which the country has been in a constant state of war. And now, with foreign forces leaving, some Afghans who fled the country are hoping to return. Daniel Khan reports now from a refugee camp in Pakistan built at the height of the Cold War.
Following the Soviet invasion, millions of Afghans crossed the border into Pakistan, seeking refuge from the ravages of war. In 2001, the US attacked the country, and millions more were displaced. They fled their country and found shelter in Pakistan.
This is Saranan Afghan refugee camp, about 90 kilometers from the Chaman-Spin-Boldak border. It is one of 54 Afghan refugee camps operational in Pakistan. The refugee population of these camps is over 1 million. This is in addition to the millions who have moved to major urban centers of the country.
With the assistance of the United Nations, since 2002, nearly 4 million Afghan refugees have repatriated back to Afghanistan. But those who stayed back have their reasons. Muhammad Agha Isaaqzai left Afghanistan when he was 25. He says he lost everything during the war between the Mujahideen and Soviet forces. When the Taliban defeated the Mujahideen, we were happy and thought we could finally go back home. But then America invaded Afghanistan and our hope was lost. But finally, after 20 years, my country is free from foreign occupation. The Taliban have promised to help us, and I think the time has come for us to go back. Zahir Pashtun came to Saranan when he was a little boy and now manages the affairs of the camp. He shows us documents of his family's property and hopes the Taliban will release it from the land mafia. For us, Afghanistan is like our mother. We have hundreds of acres of land, but the people of the Northern Alliance have illegally seized our land. When the US came and spoke about democracy, it was nothing but lies. We just want the Taliban to help us get our land back, and I know they will fulfill their promises because they are honest Muslims. Many of those trying to get out of Afghanistan fear revenge from the Taliban after working for foreign governments. But the elders at the camp say they will have better lives in Afghanistan and are confident that the end of the conflict would bring a brighter future for the generations to come. Daniel Khan, CGTN, Saranan Refugee Camp, Southwest Pakistan.
New Zealand's Prime Minister has vowed to speed up the introduction of anti-terror laws, this following a knife attack in Auckland by a man who was under surveillance. Police shot dead the Sri Lankan national after he stabbed 7 people in a supermarket on Friday. He was a known supporter of the so-called Islamic State group. Jacinda Ardern says the attacker had been arrested a number of times before Friday's incident, but by law could not be kept in prison any longer. A new bill to criminalise planning and preparation of a terror attack is awaiting final approval.
I'm committing that as soon as Parliament resumes, we will complete that work. That means working to pass the law as soon as possible and no later than by the end of this month.
Thai Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has survived a no-confidence vote. He and 5 senior ministers won the support of lawmakers over their handling of the COVID pandemic. But on the streets of Bangkok, protests calling for him to resign continue, as Martin Lowe reports.
Well, there's no victory for these anti-government protesters campaigning in Bangkok for the Prime Minister to go. But perhaps not total defeat either. Prayut Chan-o-cha survived the no-confidence vote, but pressure is mounting against him. And it's become clear there was a plot to unseat him from within his own party.
They voted their confidence so Prayut can stay as Prime Minister, but it means the MPs didn't listen to the people.
It's not a fair result. What the Prime Minister does is opposite to the vote today. He makes people suffer and should have resigned a long time ago.
Opposition MPs made some startling claims during a 4-day censure debate. Firstly, they accused the Prime Minister or his senior colleagues of making money out of buying COVID-19 vaccines. They said they'd seen papers which suggested that the government had allocated $330 million to buy 5 batches of vaccine. But in fact, they only cost $270 million. What happened, they said, to the $60 million change? Did someone pocket it? Then they accused the Prime Minister of bribing some colleagues within his own party by paying them bribes of $150,000 each to vote for him in this no-confidence vote. And turning to the pandemic, they said the government was far too slow in obtaining vaccines, and the measures they put in place were badly thought out and have crippled the Thai economy. One by one, the Prime Minister denied the claims, said they were nonsense, and challenged anyone with evidence to produce it. And when it came to a vote, he got through comfortably. But the question remains, for how long? Sources have confirmed there was a move against him from some of his own colleagues, with a feeling perhaps that after 7 years in charge, maybe it's time for a change.
And that was CGTN's Martin Lowe in Bangkok. Japan's outgoing Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga will back Taro Kono as his successor. That's according to media reports. Kono is currently in charge of the nation's vaccination rollout. Suga announced on Friday that he was stepping down after just 1 year in office. His support has crumbled as COVID-19 surged. Suga is expected to stay on until his successor is chosen in a party leadership election scheduled for September the 29th. Malaysia's former Prime Minister has been chosen to head the country's COVID recovery just weeks after he was removed from office. Muhyiddin Yassin's 17-year rule ended last month when he was ousted partly over public anger about the government's handling of the pandemic. He's now been appointed chair of the National Recovery Council, focusing on the economic response. US President Joe Biden has signed an order allowing the release of secret government documents about the 9/11 attacks 20 years ago. Biden has committed to the release of the FBI and Department of Justice material in his presidential campaign. The move has been welcomed by the families of the victims. And still ahead here on CGTN, our feathered friends. Why more and more people in Britain are keeping chickens for eggs and for company.
The EU's digital COVID certificate, which offers the promise of unlocking hassle-free travel around Europe this summer.
In less than 2 weeks' time, the Czech border will also open to all EU and Serbian citizens. 4.4 million Hungarians received their first dose of COVID vaccine.
18 and over can receive a COVID-19 vaccination, but it does come with conditions.
Third wave will probably take longer to emerge. This vaccination centre is part of a massive effort to try and drive down the numbers of the new variant that was first identified in India.
The fight against poverty has suffered a setback.
We are at a turning point in history.
It's a world under great distress and disruption.
But solving the crisis is still possible.
Change is indeed coming.
Join me, Stephen Cole, for a special 1 hour-long show here on CGTN where we speak to some of the world's top leaders and experts standing on the front line of the fight against poverty.
It's a real mistake to think that the future is decided for us. We need dialogue.
We'll spark debate.
The biggest challenge is addressing inequality.
We'll explore the solutions.
This can be done, but it requires everybody working together.
And we'll showcase the success stories to reveal how the cycle of poverty can be broken. Innovation, action, change. Only on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. The headlines again. Fighting has been continuing in Afghanistan's Panjshir Valley, the last holdout against the Taliban. They have declared victory, claims denied by opposition fighters. New Zealand promises to fast-track terror laws after Friday's mass stabbing in Auckland. And anti-government protests are continuing in Thailand after the Prime Minister survived a confidence vote over his handling of the pandemic. In New York and surrounding areas, the cleanup following Hurricane Ida goes on. At least 46 people have been killed in the US Northeast. Politicians are warning that events like this will become more frequent because of climate change. John Terrett reports.
Cleaning up after Ida's unwelcome visit. Damage in New York State so bad it's likely to cost multi-million dollars in repairs, even triggering extra cash from the federal government in Washington, D.C.
Uninhabitable homes everywhere. This is something we have to deal with and make sure that people are taken care of. This is their hour of need. This is our hour to take action and be there for them, and I promise we'll be there.
The city's mass transit system was knocked out by raging waters for many hours. Commuter rail services from nearby states and Long Island have only just got going again. New York City's mayor, Bill de Blasio, is warning of more dangerous weather and says in future the city will close transit hubs far sooner than it did during Ida.
Unfortunately, what we learned on Wednesday night is a travel ban is the kind of tool we may need to use much more frequently.
In the suburbs surrounding New York City, sodden property is being dumped outside waterlogged homes. The only consolation for homeowners, the weather has now turned sunny and warm. President Biden, who has approved emergency funds for New York and New Jersey, was in Louisiana on Friday, seeing for himself the damage caused in that Gulf state when Ida slammed into it on Sunday.
And we're in this together, and so we're not going to leave any community behind, rural, city, coastal, inland, and I promise we're going to have your backs till this gets done.
For thousands of people in the Gulf and the Northeast, this weekend will be a chance to make a start at slowly getting their lives back together again. Meanwhile, far out to sea in the Atlantic, another hurricane is churning. Larry's path is uncertain. America is watching. John Terrett, CGTN, New York.
Australia has reported its highest daily number of new COVID cases so far, with more than 1,700 infections. Officials have warned the worst is yet to come and are urging people to get vaccinated. Most of the cases were recorded in New South Wales and neighbouring Victoria. Residents there have been in strict lockdown for weeks. The Netherlands is tightening restrictions on travellers from the United States in the latest shake-up of its COVID rules. From this weekend, the US has been designated very high risk. Unvaccinated travellers are barred from entry, while there's a 10-day quarantine for those who've had both jabs. The UK is expected to make a decision on whether to vaccinate children aged 12 to 15. Jabs are not being recommended by the country's vaccine advisory body, but the UK's 4 chief medical officers are expected to review the matter. The government believes vaccinating children could help keep infections down as the winter approaches. As US coronavirus cases soar to nearly 40 million, officials say only about half of the country is fully vaccinated. Rates are lower still among teenagers. But in Colorado, a group of high school students is working to change that. Hendrik Sybrandy reports.
Okay, wait, what were you guys?
It began, Kate Senishin and Lily Lemmy say, as a passion project. It's turned into a nonprofit organization called Colorado Teens for Vaccines, whose mission is to get more COVID-19 shots into teenagers' arms.
Our ultimate goal is to organize the majority who already supports vaccination in hopes of perhaps convincing or helping other people who are hesitant about vaccines.
The high school seniors first met last year during a digital advocacy program and soon realized that social media could help address vaccine reluctance in general, COVID-19 in particular.
We aim a lot of our work towards trying to help teens talk to their parents about getting the vaccine, have real conversations, stop the arguments, stop the conflict.
They discovered early on what a Kaiser Family Foundation poll confirmed more recently, that more than half of all U.S. parents are opposed to their 12 to 17-year-old kids getting the vaccine or plan to wait and see. Through Instagram and their website, the group is using medical information and dialogue to try to clear up misconceptions surrounding the issue. A big hurdle for these teenagers is the fact that 40 states require parental consent for vaccination of minors under 18 years of age, which means many teens have to rely on their powers of persuasion.
And I think that's really important, just to be honest, to explain the facts, to even sit down with your pediatrician and your parents. Or your doctor and your parents.
I think they're seeing a lot of the kids who aren't vaccinated feel helpless.
Lily's mom says the digital space is where this group will best get the word out.
And so figuring out how to work within that system, they are much more attuned to that than anyone who's a professional communications person, I would guess, is.
An influencer army, including 18-year-old singer Olivia Rodrigo, has been recruited to promote vaccines to an age group that's been relatively slow to get its shots.
TikTok influencers or any pop stars saying you should go get the vaccine. But we truly believe that there are other ways that teens are motivated other than that emotional aspect.
I think it's incredible.
Jamie D'Amico with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment applauds the project for which she has served as mentor.
For these two teens to be doing the work that they're doing, I think is very influential, and they're having conversations, which I think is most important.
Colorado Teens for Vaccines hopes to create a playbook for other tteenagers to create their own campaigns and vaccine drives and broaden their work to the HPV vaccine and others.
We want to get back to normal. All of our volunteers, we all suffered through online school, and it was pretty rough, and so we want to be able to have a healthy community.
By reaching out to their community the best way they know how. Hendrik Sybrandy, CGTN, Denver.
The world's largest lizard, the Komodo dragon, is the latest species in danger of extinction due to climate change. That's according to a new list compiled by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Out of nearly 140,000 species, more than a quarter are threatened with extinction. However, populations of the most commercially fished tuna are showing signs of recovery, thanks to conservation efforts. Now, many people facing isolation during lockdown turned to their pets for company. But not just cats and dogs. The number of people wanting to keep their own chickens rose last year as a new generation of poultry lovers emerged. One UK charity works to rehome hens that would otherwise be sent for slaughter. John Beaver reports from Bristol.
These chickens are seeing the outside world for the first time. At just over 16 months old, they've spent their lives cooped up inside as commercial egg layers. Despite looking close to death, the condition these hens were kept in is perfectly legal. And things have actually improved since incredibly cramped battery cages were banned in the UK in 2012. These are some of the lucky ones that have been saved from slaughter by Jane Howarth and her team at the British Hen Welfare Trust. They've now saved more than 800,000 chickens over 16 years in an operation that now spans the entire UK.
It's taken over my life, but we're, in a great way. It's so rewarding. And I think one of the things that I've learnt so much is that actually it's not just us helping the hens also help us. And the feedback that we get from people is how life enriching they are, how good they are for well-being and mental health. So these are all areas that as a charity we're now beginning to explore and develop.
Lockdown saw a huge rise in interest, with demand for chickens far outstripping supply. Taking on hens is a big commitment, but there are plenty of benefits. At 72 weeks old, chickens used for commercial egg production are taken away for slaughter because at about that age, their egg production decreases. But if they're rescued, they'll go on to lay for many more years. One man who knows all about that is Professor Ben Garrett. He decided to rehome some chickens during the first coronavirus lockdown in the UK in 2020. The new hen house at the bottom of the communal gardens shared with his neighbours has been dubbed Cluckingham Palace. With a rota system to ensure they're properly looked after, they've helped bring this street together.
Yes, they're chickens, and yes, it's a lovely project to work with them and have them in our lives, but more than that, it was a way of bringing the community together. So we've got kids, 4 or 5-year-olds, who are helping dad and mum put them to bed, and we've got residents in their mid and late 80s who are coming down and doing exactly the same thing. So it's a really lovely way of bringing people together as well.
Within a few weeks, these once commercial hens looked like happy and healthy chickens, saved from slaughter for a relaxing retirement. John Beaver, CGTN, Bristol.
Finally, the many famous landmarks of the German capital have been lit up this weekend as Berlin hosts its annual Festival of Lights. Everywhere from the Brandenburg Gate to Potsdamer Square has been bathed in illuminations. The event is taking place under the motto Creating Tomorrow, with an emphasis on sustainability and carbon neutrality. The festival will last for 2 weeks. Well, in a moment, my colleague Stephen Cole will be here with the agenda. In this week's show, the chips are down, why the ongoing semiconductor shortage could be the next major geopolitical flashpoint. That's the agenda with Stephen Cole right after The World Today at 16:30 GMT here on CGTN. And our top story again, fighting has been continuing in Afghanistan's Panjshir Valley, the last holdout against the Taliban. They've declared victory, claims denied by opposition fighters. And that is The World Today. Thanks for watching. We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and on the CGTN app. Also in the UK, 24 hours a day on Freeview. From me and the rest of the team in London, goodbye.